One of the common things is about suicide. I worked with a girl who, she was in college and she had some things and she thought she just wanted to have a fun little spiritual psychic session, right? And I just asked her, I said, so how often does the voices in your head tell you to kill yourself? Silence. And then she goes, all the time. She goes, I can't get them out. And so she's like, they say, go kill yourself, go kill yourself, go kill yourself in sets of 3. This was not her saying to kill yourself. If she would have committed suicide, those entities would have snatched her soul.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious of the brain to get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. If you get value from Boundless Authenticity, then don't let the algorithm hide the truth. Help us spread the message of Boundless Authenticity by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Now, this next guest needs no introduction, unless, of course, this is the first time you've ever been on this podcast, in which case you are late, buddy, and there's no excuse. Laura Van Tyne is a psychic, remote viewer, author, and speaker. Please visit lauravantyne.com. And let's jump in. So Laura, last time we talked about manifestation, and today we are really going to pop off some headpieces with today's topic.
I love today's topic, by the way. I've never had this discussion on air like this. This is going to be fun.
Well, recently you have tasked me with a massive challenge of helping you with your YouTube channel. And I have noticed some common patterns. Me being the mind control guy, I really noticed how people's perceptions are being colored by certain things. And as I always say, there is a difference between programming and conditioning. Conditioning is behavior related and it's usually tied to some reward. Programming is just repetitive content and it's usually linguistic with the way that people act on it. And so I want to bridge the gap between what you do and what I do to explain how people are being hoodwinked and bamboozled.
I love it. Yes. And by the way, I am so grateful for you for just working on my YouTube channel. It's been phenomenal. So I am so fortunate to know you in so many ways. And that's just one aspect. So thank you. Yeah. So on the YouTube channel, we've had some comments and there's some common themes on the YouTube channel with comments from people. And I think they're worth being addressed. So as we're looking at this, and one of them is people are mentioning, well, why don't you say certain things? The biggest one is about Jesus. Why don't you say in Jesus's name, or why don't you use Jesus? The truth is that I do, but it's in a different context than maybe what people have been programmed to believe about certain religious institutions.
I would agree. And to add to that, to the question, why don't you talk about Jesus or do you work with Jesus? These are the common things I see. And what I want people to be reminded of, because I don't think that it's that they don't know this, it's that the source that they get it from dilutes the message and doesn't explain it. Or perhaps if you're a good Christian and you're studying your Bible every day, there are certain concepts that are hidden within the language that you don't really fully process how this transfers over to other things, especially when you have conflicting information that you're fed by religious doctrine that says that every time there's a psychic occurrence, it's a spirit of divination, when in reality that's not the case, because then we'd all be diviners because all thought is psychic activity. And so fear props up a lot of these concepts, or just simply not being able to understand that when you read your Bible and you study it and it says there's literally a room in heaven where God has meetings with the angels, and people who are given certain abilities are then assigned these angels. And so the angels go to this meeting room, they're given the authority to help this person, and then enter Laura. So angels don't speak or act outside of anything that they've not been given the authority to do by the Supreme Creator. So if they show up and are working to help Laura, it's because they've been given the authority by God to do so. Additionally, we are living in a time where people often are not giving their lives over to the real Jesus. They're giving themselves over to a fabricated idea of Jesus, an egregore, several entities that have so much power that they can mimic Jesus. And oftentimes when people are making these comments, they're thinking of a Jesus that belongs to a church that may not even know Jesus in its delivery. I made this point to you and you said, gosh, I never thought of it that way. A lot of the work that you're doing is exactly the same as Christian deliverance principles. And, you look at all the stuff that we will never find out that's buried underneath the Vatican. All that stuff's probably in there, but in defense of pastors and preachers and whatnot, they don't know what they don't know because they haven't been told.
They're human too, right?
Yeah.
We're all human. Well, most of us are.
The principal trick of the dark forces is to convince you that evil is good and good is evil. And so we find ourselves, as they say, battling against principalities and propping up every principality are principles. There are certain value systems and certain rules. When I say that, what you do is exactly like deliverance ministry. It's the same thing. You have to be given the authority to do it. And so when you come up against something nefarious, then also where those things overlap with what I do with all the psychological BS is that a person can't really make the deep changes that they need to make unless the contract, which in Christianity they call that a stronghold, if the person is continuing to think and act in a certain way after you move these entities out of their life, then what happens? They come back again and they come back stronger. Deliverance ministers also understand that. They call those legalities. It's access. It's contracts. So it's all the same stuff. It's just worded differently. And to be 100% transparent, Laura's not a new ager. Like, we both equally despise the new age.
No, the new age, I think the new age was created by the dark side, frankly, in many aspects.
It was, and that's well documented.
Yeah. And you look at, to break down the concept of sage, I mean, all these sage wafters out there, it doesn't do anything. So what better tool to give somebody with a good heart who wants to do good work, a new ager that doesn't have the information, just waft some sage and then they think they're doing something, but nothing has shifted for them. There's so many other tools out there. So when we look at this stuff, let's analyze where the concepts come from. Do they really work? And I think a lot of this is people don't ask enough questions. Okay, I probably drove my parents nuts as a kid because I'm always asking the questions, right? Ask the questions. And when it comes to this concept of Jesus, of Christ energy, yes, Jesus did walk this earth, but it's not the way we may think it happened, right? We're using this logical, linear human mind to go through these concepts. So as Jesus is walking the earth, he is not saying, stick me in a building of wood and stone and worship me forever. Jesus didn't ever want to be worshiped like that. So if we can turn him into an idol instead of an ascended master, the dark side wins one, right? So what happens if we realize the true power of Christ energy? In my mind, Jesus is a representative of Christ energy. This Christ energy is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful good. And Jesus, the human, was not flawless either. Jesus, the human, had a few choice words every now and then also. But him that's within us is what we're talking about. So I do work with Jesus. I do work with Christ energy every single day. I may have a different name for it. We're talking about semantics. There's a concept out there that when, two or more people use my name, things happen. And that's true too. But we have to look at the energy behind the symbol of this man. And one of the things that really honestly annoys me the most is that every time you walk into a church and you see the tortured cross of Jesus, what you're doing is you're looking at the perpetual torture of an ascended master. That is not how he should be portrayed ever. Those earlier Aramaic poses where he's got his hands up, think about that. He's light, he's powerful. heal. He's not withering, being tortured on a cross. If these crosses invoke guilt, shame, and blame, and they invoke the programming that you were talking about in the beginning, and it keeps people in this perpetual do loop of this programming. Every time you walk into a church and you see this, you're bringing in guilt, shame, and blame. I'm not worthy, all of those things. But if you could replace all of those tortured crosses around the world, and there's billions and trillions of them, how does that shift the energy of the planet?
Now, many of these churches are actually satanic portals, and it isn't that your pastor's in on it. He signed up to preach the word of God, and that's where he found himself. Nobody told him, hey, this is, everything about the geometric structure and everything about the symbology that we're using and what you just described, which is quite frankly an effigy. He wasn't told that, hey, everything about this is satanic. So he could be telling you the truth inside of a church that is built to be this way. I know we're going to get thrown out with some tomatoes for this one, but I'm okay with that. I like tomato sauce.
There's always a silver lining, right? Always look for the silver lining.
Yeah, I really felt compelled to bring that to light. And one could say that's the Holy Spirit coming through me, because wrong is just wrong. And we can't evolve if we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And our problem here is that we're fighting against two different types of mind control. One is the self-imposed biological mind control that we all have, which is to protect us, called cognitive dissonance, where we believe one thing is true, but we can't accept that it couldn't be. And then you have double-blind mind control, where two things can be true at the same time. And you find, especially a lot these days, I've never seen so much double-blind mind control when I'm poking around in people's minds as this day and age. Past couple of years, people know something is wrong, but they also know that they get something out of it, and they will tell you point blank, I just, I don't want to stop doing it. I know both these things are true for me, but my identity is that, and so sorry, I can't do that. And so I have this saying that truth that threatens identity is filtered out automatically.
Yeah, that's a really good statement, by the way.
It's rarely about resistance. It's about self-protection. Sorry to sound like ChatGPT with all the redefine. It's not this, it's this. But that's really what a lot of this stuff boils down to. I just want people to understand these concepts, because whoever has ears to hear it will go on and pass the message, and it will change people's lives, But my next question, one of the most important things that I wanted to ask you about, is actually something I have never asked, and I should have asked you the very first day I met you.
Okay.
So when you started this work, what was your original intention, and how did it evolve?
Okay. I grew up a fair weather Methodist. So my parents would go to a Methodist church every time they had marital problems. That was the extent of my religion. Okay. And, I didn't mind it, because the whole idea about Methodists, you just bring a dish to pass and you're in. Okay. How cool is that? Right. I'm just teasing. Religions can offer communities, right? They can offer people the sense of community. I've always been very spiritually inclined. I never felt comfortable in certain churches where there were tortured crosses. Okay. There's more than just the Catholic Church that has it. I never felt comfortable in that. I would see that and I would want to vomit. It was such a visceral reaction I would have even as a small child. And so growing up and moving on and getting married and having kids and all that stuff, we talked about God. We talked about those belief structures. Then one day I literally found myself, I have to really figure this out. So the concept of God, the concept of Jesus, yes, that lives within me. It always has been. It was never the forefront in my family's life in that sense, right? Because we were doing other things, but we always made it a part of who we were, because without God, there is nothing. God was the first scientist. God is the first mathematician. And so, the kids and stuff, and I understand that. But then when this holy hell started breaking loose in our house, I really had to do some deep soul searching. I had to figure out what was true, what was not true. And I always have to ask the question, why? Why is this true? Why is this not true? If I make a statement and I switch my statement around, does that statement still true? So I'll ask the same concept of a statement in many different ways to figure out what the truth is. Because again, double binding and all this other stuff that you're talking about is very accurate. So the biggest challenge I think that we all have is we have to get outside of our ego when it comes to all things, especially religious indoctrination. We have to get outside of ourselves, and we have to figure figure out what is true for us and why. And anybody that ever works with me, you always hear me say, okay, what rings true for you and why? It's one of my basic tenets, because if we can't answer that question, we'll never have the truth. You can't have the truth without the why. And then you got to vet the why.
Now, that is such an interesting principle. And it reminds me to go back to something I wanted to tell you when we were talking about real Jesus, fake Jesus. Mm-hmm. There's a very interesting character called Wyatt Coates that he doesn't have many interviews, but he has testimonies for his experience of being a really bad addict and converting to Christianity. But no, he's not your typical Christian, the fire raining down from the heavens as soon as you do something wrong type Christian as a result of it. He had an experience when he was trying to convert with entities that manifested as Jesus. These manifestations were trying to have sex with him, and they would actually him. They were trying to violate him. And so some horrible things happened to him. And he thought at first that this was the real Jesus. He thought that he was having an experience of conversion to religion through this. And then it got dark. Okay. That solidifies the concept again that the principal trick of dark forces is to convince you that evil is good and good is evil. And they will stop at nothing to get their way. And to your other point there about testing the entities goes for God too. You have to test and see if it's really Jesus or if it's God or if it's something mimicking. And I wanted to laugh because I always remember listening to Stuart Wilde, and he said ego is short for edging God out.
Ooh, I like that. I've not heard that.
Well, Stuart was like you in a lot of the work that he did. I don't know if you've ever read his work. And I think that into my arena, what I would add to what you're saying is that truth and resonance are weird things because it's hard to interpret truth and whether something resonates in truth because it's true, because you have parts of the brain that have these neurochemical responses when you learn something. Yeah. And it's the same way that we learn in addiction and other things. So we do self-sabotage by not testing our affiliations with certain religious or spiritual concepts.
We do. And we've been taught to not question, right? That's a big deal. So we've been programmed at a young age to not question. I remember years ago, I can't believe I'm going to share this story because it's really quite... It shows some of my personality that's not cool. Years ago, I had a friend of mine who was a Jehovah's Witness, single mom. Or my friend was the product of a single mom, and the church brought her in. And the JW church says that if you are molested, you need to have a witness to prove that it happened. And that this happened to my friend. And it was the male clergy that had to decide if it really happened or not. But since there was no witnesses, it never happened. And then one summer morning, I was babysitting my neighbor's kid. I was like an infant. It was like 6 months old. I'm like 16 years old. And I'm angry at this institution because of what happened to my friend. And I see them coming down my street, and they're going to come up and they're going to knock on my door. And I see this. So it's like 9 or 10 a.m. I'm in my pajamas. I've got the 6-month-old baby on my hip. And you know what I did? I go into the refrigerator. I grabbed a can of beer. I opened it up and I answered the door. And I said, yeah, I'll take all your paraphernalia. And I shut them out. But they think they're working for God. They think they're working for Jesus, but they're not questioning the rules and the morals of this institution. And that I have a problem with. This is a problem because they're not thinking. They've been programmed. How dare they allow this to happen to a 12-year-old? Right? And to say that it never happened because there was never a witness. That to me is the epitome of black magic and cruelty, because that one perpetrator changed her life forever. Right? And this is where we have to really step aside, the concept of what would Jesus do kind of thing. Right? And we have to look beyond the institution, and we have to look into Christ energy, that God gifted energy that animates all of us. And where does it sit with us? Where does it resonate with us? And so I have had some issues with organized religions based on situations like that and other personal situations, because even at like 8 years old, I'm like, these are all run by humans, by men. What makes them more perfect than me? That was my question. And I could never get an answer to that question. I know the answer now. And I remember, sitting in Sunday school and being accused of like stealing a pencil, and I had no idea what was going on, and I got in trouble for it. It's like, but I didn't do it. So these are the things we need to question. And when our rights are being violated under the name of God, what kind of rights are really being violated? And under the name of God, what does that mean? So we got to start thinking about this. What if we start shifting all of this energy? By the way, last year, 2 different Catholic churches asked me to clear their churches because they couldn't get the people to come because they saw things flying around. That to me spoke volumes. Here's another interesting thing about a Catholic church. They have these thuribles, these smokers that they walk around, right? They're full of dragon's blood resin. Dragon's blood is the resin, the sap of a very high frequency sacred tree. If these are truly houses of God, why do they have to clear the church before the people can enter them? Why do they need to smoke with the high frequency resin to remove the entities before the people come? What happens in between the time the people come? What's really going on in that institution, that church?
These are valid questions. And I think that for those who have been conditioned to think a certain way, like they were told not to question it and they were told to believe it or die, and you know, you're going to go to hell for asking those questions.
Right.
They were traumatized. And so, I mean, I had a similar experience to you. What you said about the Jehovah's Witness thing is so important because there are plenty of people who actually are on podcasts testifying that the experience that you described is a common thing. I remember it happened when I was growing up. My mother was a part of a Jehovah's Witness congregation for a while, and it was rampant here in that congregation. And they don't understand that it's a cult. They don't want to hear that it's a cult. Because again, truth that threatens identity is filtered out automatically. And when a person has experienced a particular type of trauma in their life and they are running off of this programming that is coming from repetitive content in the environment and their relationship with God is not safe, they're not going to go directly to God. They don't even know how. No. Yeah, like when you beat a dog so many times that it backs itself into a corner and becomes vicious and gnashing its teeth and growling and ready to bite you, it will bite the next stranger that comes along trying to feed it out of good intention.
Yeah. In my work, a lot of times I don't use the word God or Jesus because the people I work with have been molested, whatever it is, in the name of God. Okay. When that happens to you in the name of God, you realize that God doesn't have your back. You realize that you're not worthy of God's love, God's attention, the Christ energy, and it separates you from God. This is a black magician's tool to separate the soul from God. Period. So in a lot of the work I do, especially when I'm working with people who have had those experiences, SRAs and stuff like that, helping them to bridge a connection back to God, back to source, back to creator. I use all of these different words that they are the same, but it's semantics. They have slightly different words for the same meaning. So when I am working with others who are dealing with this, we want to help them come back to God, come back to that Christos energy. And it's a process because they have experienced the ultimate betrayal. And there's many people out there like that. And I'm blessed to be able to work with them and to help them because what it happens is it destroys their lives and their livelihood. And then you add in the fact that in the Christian religions, you have one chance to get it right or you're going to rot in hell for the rest of your life. Well, we know that's not true. We have this concept of reincarnation all over the world throughout all of these millennia. So we know we have more than one shot. But when they took that concept out of that Bible, I think it was like 562 AD or something, I'm not really sure, somewhere around there, it was to control the masses. And then you've got one shot. So not only do you have one shot to get it right, but you should give me all your stuff too, because that's going to really secure your spot in line at the pearly gates. And we really got to think about where these come from and how do we really shift this consciousness to free ourselves, because this is the ultimate matrix. Confinement through what are false deities' spiritual laws.
I wanted to tell you that Stuart Wilde also cleared churches. He said that he would see these entities hovering above churches and they would just be like siphoning away the energy of the people inside praying.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have evidence from physics where they have waves and they tell you that intention can be measured, but also counter intention. So the action against one wave will cancel out the other, right? And so when people are talking about the power of prayer and intention, yeah, that's a thing. But if everybody has a different intention inside the church, if they don't agree exactly on what they should be praying for, then you're getting that intention versus counter intention effect happening.
Yeah.
Now, if we could all be educated on that and we all pray together for common good, the black magicians that you mentioned would be in a lot of trouble, because you raised that brilliant point. Black magicians are who we should all be fighting against instead of each other. These are the people, I'm going to have to bleep this out probably, but these are the people that killed Jesus, hijacked the Bible, and they're screwing up our lives. And these are the people who are infested with these entities that you're fighting against all the time. And you're never meant to really get into it to be fighting entities all the time, but that's just the way the cookie happens to crumble for you.
Yeah, I had no idea this reality existed 25 years ago, right? Maybe 30 years ago to this degree. I've got a couple images that are really good examples of what can puppet us. Do you want me to bring it up?
Go for it.
All right. Yes. This is the first one. Let me hit share. So long story short, I have neighbors that are hosting an illegal wedding venue. Okay. And it's illegal. They're very hostile. But what happens is that people go to these weddings. These are happy occasions. Everybody starts drinking. Everybody starts doing all these things. A lot of people are also doing drugs. I've seen drug paraphernalia around the property lines, etc. What does this do? It creates a loosh machine. So anybody who goes out to a wedding, a concert, or whatever, you really need to learn how to spiritually protect yourself. All right. Bring in your angels, take your angels with you, ask them to remove what's not for your greater good, because you don't want to come home with this baggage. And so I took this photo, and I've got several of them, but this right here is their wedding barn. This thing here is a dark entity whom is referred to as Baphomet. And he marches up and down guarding his property line on the neighbor's side. This here is some kind of weird concrete building that turns into a loosh machine. And as you look up here, you can see the lights coming down and the lights going up. This is bizarre. This is the first time I had captured it. And then you've got all of this. So the top of the barn is about right here where halfway where the trees are, right? Look at the tops of these trees. This is where the top of this building ends. And it just goes down. So this was at the height of everything. And it's been very frustrating because it is so loud, you can't even hear yourself think at times, okay? Now, the next one, and this was taken about a year and a half ago. This latest one, they have been losing steam because they have been losing some court cases. And it's the fat lady hasn't sung on this one yet, but got my fingers crossed. This one is much different. It's not as contaminated. So it's either the type of people that showed up and the dark entities that could have attached to them, or are they losing their power to harness the energy? So again, we've got this energy coming down and going up. It is the wildest thing, but I do think it has to do with what is happening there. Yes, it's illegal activity for starters. But when you get into a place where there's a lot of alcohol and possibly drugs, it lowers everybody's vibrational field down. I don't want people to be afraid to go to weddings and stuff, but when we go to these things and we go out in public, if we're at concerts or whatever, we need to really learn how to spiritually protect ourselves before we go. One of the easiest ways we can do this is angels are here to assist us. Angels are here to serve humanity on behalf of God, right? So we all have access to angels. What do the churches do? Well, are you sure your problem's worth an angel's help? Or I'm not sure I'm worthy of an angel's help. We're all worthy. We all have the right to ask for their help. Angels earn karma. They earn, the more they help us, the more they get raised in their ranks also. It's like they get job promotions. But if you're just standing around the water cooler, you're never going to get promoted at work. Same thing for them, but they can't help us unless we ask. So when I go out, I'm always asking for an archangel or an angel of substance to be in front of me, one on each side, and even one in back, with the instructions that they are to stay with me the entire time I'm out, from the moment I leave to the moment I go back home, and to remove everything that is not for my greater good starting right now. And I use the concept concept of right now because there's no time in those dimensions. So I feel like I want to be a little more specific just in case. Those are one of the things you can do to protect yourself when you're going out. And we're hitting the summer season where everybody's going through, family reunions and stuff. And they're not always fun. It just depends. Everybody's got, a crazy Uncle Sal or something that likes to stir the pot, right? So bring your angels with you. Have them calm the energy. If you're going into a work environment and it's going to be a little hostile, have the angels fill the work environment for you. Have them fill the space. Have them calm the energy. It works so good. It's wild what it can do, but we got to ask. And we've not been programmed to ask for their help. In fact, we've been programmed to say, don't ask for their help. So just ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the same goes for people that don't want to hear all this stuff and they just want to ask God. Like, just ask God.
Yeah. We have to build our relationship with God too, right? We can't just start with like, oh my God, I need $10 million by tomorrow. That's not going to work. We need to build our relationship with God. Building our relationship with God is just as important as building our relationship with ourselves. And working with the angels helps to build our relationship with God. Prayer and meditation helps us to build our relationship with God also. And if we want something in return from God, one, we need to express some gratitude, and we need to really learn how to have this relationship. A one-sided relationship with God is not a relationship with God.
Absolutely. I do want to say that there was an interesting thing that happened, and I just remembered while you were talking, and I wanted to share this with you. So I was with one of my in-person clients, and I'm walking him through this hypnosis, guiding him, basically working with different parts and stuff. And so I'm having him go through this hallway and looking at different things and people in rooms and things that he needs to forgive and all that. And then I take him out through a doorway and I ask him to go through this space, and he's describing to me where he's at. He ends up in a church eventually. And I had to pull from the Laura Van Tyne toolkit all the stuff that I learned from you to help him with that. This woman that used to look after him when she was alive was still looking after him in the spirit. So I had to help her to cross over. And I got him to do it. I guided him through it, and I didn't say much to him about it. He's going to find out because he'll probably watch this episode, but I didn't say much to him about that. I just let it be what it was and did it.
It's a big deal to help someone cross over. Again, this is another part of that religious doctrine that we've been programmed to believe, right? Bad people should rot in hell, or they had unfinished business, whatever that is. But the truth is the energy that animates these bodies is our soul energy. When our soul leaves the body, we need to go back home to the heavens, higher realms, whatever your word is for it, and not linger as a ghost energy. And so when we help that soul cross over, we're actually shifting the trajectory, the evolution of that soul for the better. It's one of the most profound spiritual services we can do, period.
Using the example of the spirit of the father whose family passed when they were swept away by the river, how do you handle the emotions you feel when working on cases like that?
I have had to learn detached compassion. It was hard in the beginning to literally not go over the waterfall with that dad who died trying to save his children, right? And I do remember that one, because if I get emotional, the dark side can put a chink in my armor. Okay. So I have to be steel. I have to have the strength of steel. I can't bend. I can't flex. I've got a job to do. And sometimes at the end of the day, I hear really horrible things. And at the end of the day, sometimes I literally go on my phone and I scroll YouTube shorts. And I have two favorite themes, by the way, because I know you're dying to know. And I know you know one of them because he posted one. It was so funny. I'll either watch YouTube shorts of Friends because it's mindless, or I love the Belgian Malinois dogs. Have you seen those? Those are awesome. But I have to sometimes decompress and just watch dumb stuff, right? The fluffy stuff, because I hear really hard things, but it's that detached compassion that allows me to do what I do. But sometimes it gets built up in me and I will have I'm going to call it a breakdown, but it's not really a breakdown. And I just I kind of turn into a vegetable for half a day. It's I can't function. I've got to get this stuff off of me and out of me. And it doesn't happen that often, but every now and then it does, especially when I'm dealing with SRA children or something like that. And I'm talking about the living people, not those necessarily in the ether, because when you hear these stories coming out of the people and the living people, it is rough. So yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking.
I totally understand that as well, because I get that that happening to me too. I don't really scroll on social media. I have a bird for that, and I have chickens for that and stuff. And
I miss my chick. I used to have birds and bees.
Yeah, that's why it hit me really hard when Patty passed away. And I know that Patty was actually probably taken out because of the warfare I was going through. Chickens get sick unexplainably and stuff like that, but the way that she got sick repeatedly was a reflection of what was going on around me, because there were birds that were dying and plants.
I've had that happen.
And all that kind of stuff, you know, and it's hard when you're getting attacked and you're also processing hard stuff that other people are saying and things like that.
Yeah.
But I totally get that. And one of the things that pisses me off is when I'm dealing with somebody and they are stuck in self-sabotage, and, you know, whatever you are in bed with, you will not speak against. So whatever it is that you have a need to self-justify is going to keep you stuck in the position that you're in, and you will do it and do it and do it because truth that threatens identity is filtered out automatically. So you will never hear what somebody's saying to you, no matter how they say it to you. Anything that goes against what you need to tell yourself about a situation to stay still, especially if you're dealing with contracts or strongholds or whatever people prefer to call it, it's not going to break. And I know that once I tell someone that you're under spiritual attack, because when you start hearing things about you or saying things like, I just want to die and things like that, you're under spiritual attack. That's not a normal thing for your brain to tell you. Your brain always tells you, I want to live. How do I get out of this?
Right. And, you know, those that are under spiritual attack need to understand there's a reason for it. Why are you a threat? Right? You got to add, again, it's about the questions. What is it about you that's a threat? In the beginning, I had no idea why we were dealing with what we were dealing with. And it wasn't until, you know, hindsight's awesome. You know, I look back and I'm like, oh, now I get it. But it took me a long time to get there. So those who are under spiritual attack, there's a few things. One, they may have been living a life that created an opening with certain lifestyle and certain habits. And the other one is that maybe someone's got a specific soul mission to help humanity that will cause attacks too. Now, just because you're under attack doesn't mean you should roll over and give up and whine and cry. It's your job to get out of it. It's your job to figure it out. And we can ask for help and guidance, but ultimately it's up to us, because I can't do anything for any of my clients that they wouldn't do for themselves. Sometimes I'm just showing them a way or cleaning things up so they can move forward.
And, you know, the same way that people don't hear you when you're trying to tell them how to solve their problems, God is always in the room. And so they're doing the same thing to God too. God's just like, you know, you remember that Will Smith meme where he's just like, I'm pointing at us, like God is like that. He's like, I sent you this, you know, this is your sign, or moving things around, and people just won't see it. They just won't acknowledge that they're still connected. God hears you and he's trying to move stuff around, but you just won't act when he's telling you to act, right? And this is
and I call that getting hit over the head by the cosmic 2x4, right? You just keep getting hit over and over and over. And it's like, eventually, you know, I get shorter and shorter and shorter, right? But, you know, the 2x4 gets heavier and bigger and the scenario changes. Sometimes we do need these experiences so we can learn the lessons, right? But how many themes and variation of the same lesson do we really need to learn if we can kind of figure it out? And again, it all comes down to those questions, right? When you can ask the questions, it really means you have free will, that nothing is holding you back.
Yeah, absolutely. People just need to ask themselves simple questions. Simplicity is key. Like, you test a being, it's not of God. Is the thought that you're having of God? Does that sound like it would be something that God would say? You know, it can be that simple. But one of the interesting things that you said is that you have all of these different beings that you have to deal with. And there's now this question of what's the difference between possession and influence? Because back to the black magicians, just look up somewhere Medai. You realize that there's a cult of Medai. We get media, meditation, all these different things from the etymology. And these are the people, again, that are trying to pull us into false spirituality, all these other concepts. But one of their main tactics is influence. So media, right?
Yeah.
What is entertainment? It's a combination of enter,
entrainment,
and obtain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're trying to obtain your spirit, obtain your body, and entering you through stuff that's disguised as fun, right?
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean we can't have fun. And we have to look through these things judiciously also, right?
We were talking about the difference between possession and influence.
A possession is when an entity comes over you wholeheartedly and they take over your moves. I had a really interesting client about a month ago who was born with an addictive personality. And her whole life, she struggled with alcoholism. She has struggled with all sorts of things. And her life was a big hot mess. And she couldn't get it together. And she kept trying and trying and trying. And it was really interesting because she's genuinely a good person. And so I start working with her. And part of the process of working with people, I'm always looking for the ghost energies. That's rule number one, cleaning the playing field. And what I discovered was that before she was born, years before she was born, her grandfather had died at the age of 40 as an alcoholic. When she was born, that ghost energy of that grandfather went into her body. And this ghost energy had been inhabiting, possessing her body. She couldn't figure out if she was gay or straight. She always wanted alcohol, but she didn't like the taste of alcohol. I mean, it was just all of this stuff. When we removed him, it was the most profound experience. She wrote me back. She said her whole life she felt like she was fighting to be in front of her body and she didn't know what that meant and why. That was a full-on possession. It was a full-on possession of one human into another human. An addict doesn't cross over. An addict gets recycled and recirculated from the lower astral. It doesn't mean that they're bad people, but they got to really work on cleaning themselves up or they have to find somebody to help cross them over. So that's one type of a possession. Another possession is a dark entity can come in and possess somebody. When a dark entity comes in and possesses somebody, I can usually see it in the eyes because the eyes go black and vacant quite often. In a meditation, I'll have them look at a body part, their own body part, and I could, by their answer, I can tell if they're possessed or not. And so clearing a possession is one thing, and getting yourself spiritually strong to remain free is another thing. So when I work with people, I teach them how to be strong. Influence is different. So influence can be like I'm hearing voices in my head telling me to do harmful things. I know that's not me. Something is trying to control me, but I've got enough wherewithal that they can't control me. One of the common things is about suicide. I worked with a girl who she was in college and she had some things and she thought she just wanted to have a fun little spiritual psychic session, right? And I just asked her, I said, so how often does the voices in your head tell you to kill yourself? Silence. And then she goes, all the time. She goes, I can't get them out. And so she's like, they say, go kill yourself, go kill yourself, go kill yourself in sets of 3. This was not her saying to kill yourself. If she would have committed suicide, those entities would have snatched her soul. That's a big deal. We removed those entities and that back talk was gone. It was out of her field. And that was several years ago. And I think she's still fine to this day. But that's an influence.
That's basically a similar thing as a generational curse.
Yeah, it is. And these things can follow family lines. A lot of times when I'm working with people, I have the ability, it sounds very hokey, but I see spiritual DNA almost like that matrix string theory stuff. And I'm looking for miasms and missing strings and things like that. And I will go through and analyze it and figure out what is where, what needs to be repaired, what entities are attaching themselves to the family line. So family patterns, negative family patterns are some of the hardest things to break. There's a reason why incest, alcohol addictions, beatings are generational because there's some other entity puppeting those family lines and they're unaware of it. They don't know, but they just keep getting looped back into this cycle over and over and over. And when you can remove those dark entities from the family lines, and this involves curses and hexes and everything else, you start to free the family. The person receiving the healing, so to speak, is the first line of winning this war, but then it echoes out into the family. So when somebody can not repeat a pattern, maybe have children and make sure they're not abused, they've broken the family pattern. That's a hard thing to do.
See, this is the same thing. This is what I'm telling you about how everything you're doing is basically the same principles as deliverance, because in deliverance, oftentimes they look for generational curses based on these agreements, which they call covenants. Mm-hmm. And they break these covenants that the grandfather or great grandfather or whoever along down the line made. And it's usually through what they call sin, because sin is just basically a principle of access, right?
Yeah.
So again, we're dealing with principalities, which are just principles, rules of engagement that these entities are using. And, you know, when you look at porn or you watch television and there's sex scenes and stuff like that, you might think you're just, you know, I'm just going to look away or whatever.
Yeah.
But the more graphic it is, the more legalities, the more access, the more contracts you make with these entities that can get on you.
Yeah.
And then one day it escalates to the point that, you know, maybe you have a generational curse or something. Like I have a client right now that is dealing with something like that, but she don't want to hear anything I have to say about anything. Anytime it gets close to the reality of the situation, which is you have to change, you have to take responsibility, boy, do these entities flare up. And all of a sudden,
they do, right? Yeah.
You hear the same language across people. I'm sure you hear the same language too. You're going to validate this. They always say, I'm triggered or something ridiculous, where it's I'm triggered translates to, I don't have the emotional maturity to deal with the truth that you're telling me about myself.
Exactly. And we've got so many. And by the way, people who are triggered have the deepest forms of anxiety too, because they're sweeping everything under the rug. Anxiety is a byproduct of all of this, and we got to clean it up. You mentioned the word sin. I kind of want to like go on my soapbox for a moment, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So,
I welcome it.
The concept of sin invokes guilt, shame, and blame. It lowers our vibrational field. It puts us in a negative pattern, a do loop, right? So we keep looping. So if we can start to replace the word sin with experience, instead of I have sinned, I had an experience. Here's what I've learned. How does that shift, right?
It should shift a lot, unless, of course, a person hits a wall where they use my experience as a self-justification, because now we have the new age problem that is presented, where it's not just the new age, because we know new age is coming from the same demonic entities that are in Hollywood and all this stuff and psychology and all that stuff that study us like lab rats. So they try to figure out how to flip everything on its head and turn something good bad or something useful useless. You get up against these people that are like, well, my experience is such and such and such, and so that's my truth. And then when you tell them that the truth doesn't stop being true just because you don't like the way it sounds or how it fits your existing narrative, you're trying to preserve your experience as a fact. And you're arguing with them, and you're getting into something that's worse than cognitive dissonance, because no matter what you do, they don't want their experience to be invalidated, because as you were saying now, the learning that they derived from it was negative. It didn't push them in a positive direction, right?
Yeah. If we can replace the sin with an experience and own it, atone for it, understand it, and then we've got some problems being solved. But you're right about people saying, well, this is my experience, this is how I feel, and this is the way it is, and that's that. That's not helpful. That is never helpful.
Just like unforgiveness, they don't understand it. It only hurts them. Like you're just telling them what you're telling them because A, they might be paying you, and two, you you wanted to know the answer to the question, right?
You're right. It's work. Nothing worth having is easy.
Yeah, I just think it's really great that you brought up that thing about sin, because people need to understand that it is used wrong. Anything you use wrongly will come against you. Yeah. It's just such a silly thing, because it's so simple. An 8-year-old could figure it out that a sin is just something that you need to take responsibility for, that's in your values, that's incorrect, or some other action. If you know, and I guess because everything's been so normalized, that knowing and what you actually end up doing are different. Because let's say your friend says, let's go to a strip club, and you know that you're not messing with that stuff, but somehow you still end up there. Well, you got to take responsibility for how you ended up inside of that building.
Right.
Or if you end up, you're scrolling on Instagram and all of these chicks come up and they're half naked, and you end up looking at that and you get in trouble with your girlfriend, then you have to take responsibility for the time you spent still looking at that content, regardless, even if it was accidental. It's like the Ross and Rachel thing. We were on a break, but the reason why it's funny is because we all knew that morally it was incorrect, and that it was disrespectful to the agreement that they made with each other, even though they still loved each other. But they said they loved each other, and they did things that communicated the opposite, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so people get normalized into this behavior through things like that, because you're like, we were on a break, ha 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 ha. Now the line between what's right and what's not is blurred for you, right?
Exactly. Yes. And this is where having a strong constitution and knowing who you are is of huge value, right? When we can have strength in who we are as a person and we know who we are without the ego side of it attached to us, we become immensely strong. The dark side fears that. They don't want us to stand in our truth, the honest truth.
There's comments on your channel as well using Christian language to insult the work that you're doing. And they're probably bots because you're a celebrity now, or you're doing good work, and that's one of the ways that they attack you. They just set up these bots and stuff. But I would urge anybody to think about this critically. It's so simple. Again, the light doesn't attack the light.
No.
And if a person's commenting negativity using the name of Jesus, for example, that's a dark spirit working through that person. What does Laura do for a living? She fights off the darkness. So they're going to send their operatives. So we understand that the darkness has many tricks. We also understand that people are not the enemy. It's a dark spirit working through that person that is the enemy. And if the darkness can get access to your mind, then he can control your soul. He can control how you live, right?
Yeah.
I just use the darkness for, evil, the devil, whatever people want to call it.
That's
right?
the big over blanket, right? The blanket statement. Absolutely. And, people will say harmful things to try to get to me. And, I'm not unique in that way by any stretch of the imagination, because if these people who they're either bots or they have dark entities rolling through them are trying to cause harm, to break me, to break someone else, it means that they know we're standing in our truth. And so you just have to let it roll off your back like water on a duck. And this goes for everybody out there, because we all get put in these positions where it's like, wow, man, they really hurt my feelings, or whatever that is. It's like, did you stand in your truth? Good. Move on.
Yeah, I want to move on to the entities behind unforgiveness, because I want to preface it by saying this. Unforgiveness is the thing I know I'm going to see in every self-sabotage session. Now, when you're under spiritual attack, you will make excuses for your limitations. And that is the very nature of self-sabotage. But it all begins with a misconception that what is evil is good. And as the saying goes, evil is live spelled backwards, and lies keep you in suffering. Now, I tell people very simplistically, there's only one letter difference between God and good, and one letter difference between devil and evil. It is so simple.
Yeah.
If you don't keep reawakening and realigning with the simplicity of spiritual warfare, you are going to get trapped on any given day. It is not something you can just drop your guard. And I'm not saying that to be annoying to some people that might be listening. I'm saying that because I just went through a series of spiritual attacks, and it humbled me. And I realized, you know what? I am not as spiritually solid as I thought I was because I got attacked. Now, those things had to be getting on me somehow. And you just got to deal with that. You have to be big enough to deal with that and make sure that you don't sweep anything under the rug and say, okay, yeah, I'll deal with that later or anything like that, because, I'm human too. And I'm so busy working with everybody else's bullshit that you run out of time to work on your own. Sometimes you just want to go to bed at night and you're like, God, I just don't even have any time left for this.
Yeah, right? The old phrase, plumber never has their own house done, right? But you're right. And with these attacks, we also have to realize that we hit these certain plateaus and it's like, oh, I can relax. But what happens is both sides evolve. The dark side evolves and the light side evolves. And so we're always going like this. Okay, we always have to level up, so to speak. And, I'll tell people will tell me like, oh, well, I've done this. I've, studied Reiki. I'm good, blah, blah, blah. These are just like one facet of everything, right? So look at everything, study everything, and just know that, once you think that you've kind of crossed that threshold where you're untouchable, guess what? You're going to get poked.
The best way to say this that everybody understands is you hear these terms like chosen ones, or Christians say anointed and different things like that. In New Age, they say light worker. The more light you have in you, the more spiritual gifts God has given to you, the more you will get attacked, because entities can see down your timeline from before you're born, see who you can become, and they work in generations. We just talked about generational curses. That's why they do what they do, because they work in generations. They know what bloodline produces who, and so they attack those people to thwart your attempts. And so if you think that you are under spiritual attack right now, well, first of all, call Laura Van Tyne. And secondly, think about that. Think about where people in your family have been bound by certain things. things, rejection and so on and so forth. So let's go from there and dive straight into the entities of unforgiveness. What's happening when you're helping people work with that phenomenon?
The concept of forgiveness, first of all, this is especially a hard concept for people who are justice oriented. I am very justice oriented. And when I see an injustice, I just want to just go after them. But forgiveness, we have to understand a couple things about forgiveness. Bad things happen to good people, period. Okay. Good things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. It's just part of the play. But when we experience an injustice, when somebody hurts us, when somebody harms us, this concept of forgiveness there's never a timeline for it. Somebody will say that, oh, well, you need to forgive them. It's been like 2 months since so-and-so cheated on you or whatever. Or, you need to forgive them. Forgiveness doesn't have a timeline. Forgiveness is a concept where we have to work through ourselves. We have to work through those hurts. So don't ever let somebody put a timeline on your ability to forgive somebody. These injustices can be small or they can be mountainous. I was working with a person who was near retirement, and she went to a conference and she entered the hotel room, and there were 2 men in her hotel room, and bad things happened. This is rough, right? How does she forgive something like that? I can't tell her when and how. These are processes we're going to work through. We're going to remove the dark entities, remove the things to help her get to the other side. This is a big deal. I mean, we hear the worst things. I hear stuff that makes the angels weep. But when it comes to the day-to-days of forgiveness, somebody took my lunch out of the fridge or whatever it was, we have to work through it. We have to learn how to let go emotionally. So part of being human is learning how to master these emotions. When we let the emotions lead us, we're not helping us on our spiritual path. So when we can step back and even just as simple as take a breath, somebody hits my car and they're standing over there and I'm really upset because I can't afford the repairs or whatever it is. If I step out of my car and I take a breath and I just allow myself to breathe, it just takes a moment, I can have a better conversation, which means the outcome will be a better outcome. So, and these are all little aspects and tenets of forgiveness. And forgiveness is not always easy, but it can also be some of the most rewarding work we do. Look at my life now compared to what it was then. And it's because I've been able to forgive. And forgiveness isn't just, stating the word, oh, I forgive you. It has to live within you. And, some of these injustices are intentional. Some of them are accidental. I think the accidental injustices are a little bit more easy to forgive than the intentional ones because there's an arrow of direct harm coming at us. So give yourself the gift of time when it comes to forgiveness, but also honor yourself in the process of learning to forgive.
What about the willingness to forgive as the principal tool? Does the willingness to forgive get you authority or help from the light side?
I think so. If you're willing to forgive, you're willing to let go of all this baggage you're collecting, right? So people who are stuck in this pattern of not being able to forgive, they're holding so tight all of these emotions and all of these, I'm going to call them low vibe emotions, anger, upset, all of this stuff. And when you release it, you're literally 50 pounds lighter in a heartbeat. And learning to let it go, ask your angels to help you let it go too. You don't have to do this alone. You can, as you're working with your teams of angels, ask them to help release this ability so you can forgive somebody for something. Ask them to take those emotions off of you. Ask them to and it's about the ability to bring in your angels and ask them to help you with the concept of forgiveness, whatever that may be. If it's a family member that took something from you, death brings out the worst in people, let's face it. Just ask and be willing to let go of those emotions, because sometimes these negative emotions like anger keep fueling our fire and keep sustaining us. It wears out our adrenal glands by far, and it's not healthy. So am I addicted to the adrenaline of not forgiving? That's another concept, right? So if I can learn how to let go, if I can learn how not to be angry about this or reactive about it, it can really help us to learn this concept of forgiveness. I think it's one of the things that everybody on this planet has to experience at some point is, how do you learn to forgive?
Forgiveness forgiveness doesn't mean access, and it doesn't mean reconciliation.
Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetness, right?
Absolutely. I've had to tell some clients, you don't even have to mean it. But once you can get those words out of your mouth, that's the first step, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And sometimes it's forgiving yourself for something. That may be the hardest one to do. And if you're in this position where you need to learn how to forgive yourself for something you've done, I'm going to recommend this cheesy little practice that works well. Look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and say, I love you, and mean it.
Gosh, there's so many people that can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so directly from the YouTube channel, this person asks, when we die, how do we avoid going to the fourth dimension? And if we can't avoid going there, how do we extract ourselves to get out of the fourth dimension and cross over to heaven?
That is such a beautiful question. So what we've been experiencing for many millennia on this earth plane and even other planets is that we reside in this 3D world of physicality, right? See, touch, taste, sense, and smell. This overlay of the fourth dimension is where the ghosts reside, the dark entities reside. It was hijacked by these beings millennia ago. So when we leave the body, we're supposed to go from the third dimension to the fourth dimension for soul healing, restoration, and on up to the fifth and above dimensions. And in this process, they've taken over that fourth dimension. So all of these holy texts have some phrase along the way that says, lo, behold, I shall walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. What does that mean? It means you've left the body, get your butt out there, right? Just bypass it. Once you know, once you know that this is a possibility of something trying to soul nap you or bring you back into that loop, it gives you your power back just knowing it. If you know that you're going to die, if you're ill or if you're elderly or whatever it is, have your home full of angels all the time and have them direct you. When I leave my body, I want these angels to take my soul back home to the higher realms, back home to heaven, whatever your word is for it. A lot of people are concerned about a false light, and I think that's maybe what this person was referring to. Again, be discerning and inquisitive, but your soul energy will know where to go if you allow your ego mind to be free. Don't let your ego mind, even in death, control where you go. And many people, once we know that this is a possibility, it's game over for the dark side. They no longer have access to us. And that's, I think, the biggest tenet, so to speak, of how to do that.
Well, if this is interesting to you so far, then I would encourage you to leave a like on this video and share it. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but you're actually helping this channel to grow. So if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can get the information that the mainstream doesn't want you to hear. Back to Laura.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for this time. I love having these conversations with you.
This is what I feel called to do at this time. And this is what the world actually needs. Thank you as well.
It is. Thank you.
One of the most interesting things that I've noticed is that any of these beings that you find, because it was true in my session with you, whether it's a particular type of being or a combination of entities working together, they all have a master. Explain that.
There's politics in all realms and all dimensions. So just because we leave these bodies behind doesn't mean the politics don't follow us. Every good organization has a recruitment department, okay? Every good organization has an HR department, right? Human resources. It's the same concept. It's just in a different dimension. So there's usually a hierarchy with these nefarious entities. One is there's these lower realm entities, and they can look like 3 foot, 1 meter, wispy tall things. They can look like little gargoyle creatures. Their job is to harass us, to get us to lash out at somebody else so they can extract our energy. Their job is to extract our energy, and then they have to give it to their bosses. Their bosses could be a standard black magician, which to me looks like a skeletal being with scraggly hair. They're usually former humans that have turned dark, not always, but usually. Then you've got like another layer to that would be the Hat Man. The Hat Man is this guy in this fedora hat. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about with the Hat Man. And they stand usually in one spot in a room or building or wherever, and they observe. The Matt Damon movie, I forget what it's called. I think we might have talked about it, is a really good example of that. The Adjustment Bureau. The Adjustment Bureau, yeah.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, The Adjustment Bureau is a really good movie about the Hat Man, because what he wants to do is he reports to his bosses what's happening so they can send other dark entities out to thwart the free will of that person so they cannot achieve their goals. And then you get into like the reptilians and the grays and the archons and, you know, the Anunnakis. And there's always this political hierarchy. And even within the grays, there's like 7 different levels of gray aliens. That's a hierarchy too. And then you've got the grays who are the power brokers between like the reptilians and the archons or whomever else. And even with the reptilians, you've got a huge amount of hierarchies there. So it is very much interplayed in politics.
I want to go deeper on that. So there's a lot of talk of disclosure, and we see people who come up with these stories about positive experiences with grays and stuff like that, or they're talking about the Anunnaki and all that stuff. But how does your experience with fighting off these beings, saving people from them, shape the narrative around disclosure?
In the disclosure community, there's a lot of divisions within the communities with disclosure. Some people will say, there's one famous person out there who just said, oh, all the grays left the planet. I'm thinking, really? And it caused this little feeding frenzy of loosh, right? So sit with yourself. And as we're removing, if so, earlier today, I was working with a woman who had a lot of reptilian energies around her, by her, and we removed them. So when I remove them, they are handed off by light beings who take them out of that 4th dimension, which impacts our 3rd dimension. And they send them back into the higher realms where I'm going to call them a form of imprisonment, right? Rehabilitation, whatever you want to call it. It's above my pay grade to say, where you go. Just get them out of here so they never come back to do this harm. They don't have the right. They're parasites. They need us. We don't need them. So when we remove them, it frees that person up to live life more freely, more sovereignly. But that person also has to make sure that they have kind of cleaned up their act. If there's an addiction happening or if there's something going on, they got to heal that wound also. And it's not just addictions, but it can be anything. So we got to heal the wound. You got to be aware of what's going on and aware, is this really what I'm thinking? Is this really the choice I want? Or is something putting that thought in my head? So there's many ways to this, but ultimately, if you're ever working with somebody out, if anybody's out there working with another practitioner who's going to remove these entities, ask them what they do to remove them. Make sure they remove them off of the earth plane permanently. Anybody who binds them, buries them, or casts them away, that's the wrong answer. You cast away a nest of reptilians, guess what? They're going to come right back at you even more angry. So use your logic with it too, but there's a lot of ways, but just to seal yourself up, shore yourself up. And when I work with people too, I help educate them on how to do that, because this stuff doesn't exist in most spiritual books. Although I've got a couple books out and stuff like that, I'm trying to get it out as much as possible. This pesky thing called time makes it sort of difficult sometimes.
Not even to mention that these days there's only 30 seconds in a minute.
I know, right?
So now, whenever I hear the term Galactic Federation, I always see these psychic images in my mind's eye of an energy harvesting unit that's parked off outside the Earth, just draining life force from anyone who believes it's a real thing. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but I'm sure I'm not getting that imagery for no reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there who get their claim to fame like, oh, I talked to my Galactic Council and they said this. So what happens is everybody's like, ooh, you just talked to your Galactic Council. I want to have this inside information. So I'm going to listen. I'm going to believe everything that comes out of your mouth because it came from some Galactic Council. Well, I can say anything. I can make up all kinds of shit. Are you going to believe me? I want you to use some discernment and say no. But do those councils exist? Yes. Am I privy to being able to partake in certain knowledges with some certain light beings? Yes. I use that information for the greater good. I'm not going to, and these are like my spiritual teams. Okay. This is my spiritual guides, and they're rather high level at this point. I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm not ever going to, and I could have done this and I could have boosted my ratings like crazy by talking about this Arcturian said this and this said that. I'm taking away your opportunity to learn how to listen. And instead, it's a form of eavesdropping, right? That people are so engaged in. And when there's one person out there in particular who does these things, and I keep finding myself becoming these people's clients because they listen to this person and their Galactic Council messages, and they take the courses and whatever, the live things, the live streams, and then they become infected with dark entities. And it's really sad because at the end of the day, when I can run out of business, my God, this is going to be a great great place to live, right? But these people are harvesting. There's people out there who just want some inside intel, but they don't want to work for it. And it's not a criticism. We all want something. There's all of it. We're all feeling like we're missing a piece of something. We're trying to find a group or a community that we're in vibe with. But really, if somebody keeps talking about the messages they're getting from the galactics and whatever else, really think about how true that is, because I can make up anything. And it's the same concept on these YouTube tracks that claim to be like, I don't know, 532 hertz or whatever it is. This is the ultimate, clearing music. How do you know? I can make up anything and just pretend it is what it is.
I already explained that one to you.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Just to jump on that again, in case anybody doesn't understand what I mean when I said I explained it, those frequencies aren't really any different to anything else. As long as I tune my guitar or my piano or whatever instrument it is to 440 hertz, I'm going to cycle through the same frequency range that's available to you based on a universe's harmonic resonance. And if I tune my guitar to 432 hertz, I'm just going to go through the same frequency range, just tuned to something different. You ask anybody that works in a recording studio, they'll tell you, it's a lie. There's the reason why we agree to tune to 440 hertz is so that everybody can agree that their instrument is in tune, regardless of what instrument you have. So it's not to kill you, as the narrative says. But, when you are into conspiracy theories, you probably just woke up and you're in fear and you're so convinced that the government's trying to kill you that you'll believe anything, or some new age dodo bird comes up with it and says, oh, this makes your meditations better. And it doesn't. It doesn't. No,
not at all.
And people prey on these things just the same way as they prey on recordings, music industry BS that you hear about now that the Epstein files is out. You can talk about it without getting slapped for it. But we know that they bind these entities to these things using these spiritual containers. And so,
do.
What's interesting is that the name Derek Prince comes to mind. My grandmother used to be into Bible stuff and Derek Prince and all those kinds of things. And he was one of the first people doing like deliverance and talking about there's demons in music and stuff like that, like secular music. And he was actually saying this stuff and people thought he was crazy. And he got lumped in with radical Jesus freaks that were probably racist and different things that weren't good by their other daily associations. So he got classed as a fuddy-duddy for saying these things, but he was right. And then you had John Todd that came out and was talking about how he was a Satanist, and he was basically asked to go around to various famous artists and, prey on things or see what they were doing and, work with record labels and talent scouts and stuff to see how they could get certain people to use their energy for, as you were saying, loosh factories, basically. So we're all just these projects to these people where they just see us as batteries and they can drain us dry by getting us to consume certain things. And that again is another thing that falls into your realm where it's like, okay, test it and see, because you may just be having a neurotransmitter and you think that, okay, because that makes you feel good, that it is good, but it's not. Same thing when you were talking about brain candy earlier, where there's all these theories on the internet and people want to believe them, they want to believe what the channelers say.
Yeah. Right now you got all these people out there talking about David Wilcock is channeling them, right? How do you really know? Okay. Yeah.
You know how I feel about David Wilcock, because he comes out at one point and he's all googly eyed and he's like, I'm the reincarnation of Edgar Casey. And I'm not trying to ridicule him, but... No,
but everybody's out there. They're all saying that, I'm channeling him. This is his message. And it's like, come on, people. Just, it's not worth your energy to get sucked into these things.
Well, remember what I said to you. You want to find out who your friends are, die. Because you'll be watching them from the other side, watching how they act, right? Everybody's like, oh, he was my good friend and stuff like that. And they're saying stuff that, you don't say that about somebody that you're friends with.
No, and you have one photo with them from 20 years ago or whatever. It's like, is that really your best friend? Right? And that goes with anybody, but and it's just, it goes into this whole concept of, I'm going to call it false fame, right? It's just anything for a click, anything for a like or whatever. But we have to understand, we have to take our power back in these situations. And, if I am working on something, I can do it internally. It's okay to get guidance, but just don't hand your power over to somebody on a silver platter, because you never know what they're going to serve you.
Final question.
Okay.
I have a theory based on all of my obsessive research into the Tavistock Institute. Because if you read the Tavistock Institute by Dr. John R. Coleman, he will tell you that Tavistock basically wants to normalize the use of psychedelics so that they can mind control the population and get people to go everywhere except for towards God and to be complete nutcases and all kinds of stuff like that. But within the spiritual realm of things, is there access that's granted to you by using ayahuasca and other psychedelics?
It is very dangerous because, first of all, you really don't know. Let's say there's a practitioner or a leader in the group or whatever, facilitator. You really don't know what they're connected to on a spiritual basis. Do you need a psychedelic to find something out, or do you just do the hard work yourself? I worked with somebody just yesterday who was very much into plant medicines, is what they call it. And under his watch, somebody died. And he's trying to explain to me that this person died so they could create a death portal to open up for the earth. It's like, no. And I know. And so, first of all, what would go through a death portal? Probably not angels. I don't know, right? I am leery about these types of plant medicines. I have worked with somebody who was taking, I don't even know what it was called, but I'm going to call it LSD, but a form of LSD, because what it did was it helped to rewire her brain so she could function properly due to severe abuse. She doesn't do it every day, but it's a micro dose. It's like a micro dose once a week. So it's very different than I think what we're talking about here. So I'm conflicted because I think there is a lot of harm that can happen. It's not much different. And I used to get this all the time when it was the popular thing to do, open someone's chakras. Oh, I had my third eye open. Well, all this shit's flying around now and I see it and I'm scared. And So now I get new clients because I got to figure out how to repair that third eye chakra so we can close things up and not make them vulnerable to these entities. So when we're doing this, a lot of entities can attach to you. Can there be releases? So part of this is to have a release of whatever baggage you have. I think there's honestly more than one way to skin a cat. I like cats. I really don't like that expression, but you get what I mean. So that's my conflict. How necessary is it? What is your situation? And what are the sidebars? I think this is a slippery slope, personally.
It is a very slippery slope. And I would add to that, subconscious mind is talking to you all day long. All you got to do is listen. You don't need ayahuasca. Don't be stupid. Honestly, that's just blatant stupidity. To be like, I want to go deep on this thing. Well, talk to yourself.
Exactly. Spend time with yourself.
It's like a fetish for human beings, though. It's like, I have to make my mental health as difficult as possible. Otherwise, I don't feel like I'm doing anything the right way.
Right. So true. So true. We've got to be careful. It's no different than, you could consider heroin a plant medicine, right? I mean, cocaine is a plant medicine, comes from somewhere. Having said that, you got to be careful because we're opening up these doorways now. There's always these new doorways that are going to be opening up so that they can try to capture us.
And this is the part that people are not going to like if they're using plant medicine. The reality of the situation is how people act when they get a taste of it is exactly the same trajectory of behavior as any other addictive substance.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear that because they got to admit that they got a problem and that it's a drug.
Yeah. I was working with somebody about a month ago and she was telling me, a couple months ago, she was telling me that she was doing this. She went to some lodge to do something like this and she couldn't stop purging. And as she's purging, these entities are coming out of her. It's like, I'm looking at the word purge again, purging, purgatory, all of this stuff. Well, where are they going? They're going to go over to the next person. They're going to go over here. They're going to go over there. If you're literally purging entities, where do they go?
I was going to say that me and you and Jerry Marzinski should do an episode because every time I talk to Jerry and I just ask him, so any more ayahuasca stuff? He's like, oh, I got 2 calls today with people that, they got entities on them from ayahuasca.
Yeah, I probably get ayahuasca victims or a derivative of a couple times a month.
Yeah, when people start telling me about plant medicine, I just don't say anything. I just let them talk because
No,
it's the same thing as going like to the bar or whatever, you know?
Yeah, it is. And it's, I'm too much of a control freak to give that much up, right? I don't want to give that up. I want to be able to do my own work. I want to be able to do the hard things because I know when I'm on the other side of it, it's amazing.
And I'm going to get attacked for saying this, but I've never met anybody that has done the psychedelic route that they are then able to recreate that process without it.
Yeah.
Self-regulation is your birthright, you know?
Absolutely.
I don't feel like you're taking it seriously if you do that stuff and then you think that you're a spiritual person and so you're operating on this principle of double bind mind control, because now two things are true. The first thing that's true is that you're a spiritual being having a human experience and you have a brain that collects all these beliefs, and so you can change these beliefs anytime you want. And then you're saying along with that principle that everything is within you, but then you go and you're looking for something outside of you because you're saying that you can't do it without that.
Yeah, right. A little bit of an oxymoron too.
Yeah.
You know, I think anybody listening to this, we have to know that we have it within ourselves and we have the power within ourselves. We have the authority, the ability within ourselves. And we are all just works in progress. Nobody lives life on earth with perfection. There's no such thing. There's no learning in perfection. But when we can have these experiences and learn from them and even find the silver linings in the hard things, we come out the other side so much stronger.
All right. Before we wrap this up, any questions for me?
My biggest question is, how do you find the best questions? And I'm serious. You always have the best questions. You always go deep. I love what you do. I guess one of my big questions is when you use hypnosis, how does that work? Because we've had some comments about hypnosis happening. What's your concept around hypnosis?
First question, how do I find the best questions? I'm doing the same thing that you're doing. I am not thinking. I'm giving myself over to God, so to speak. So when you're talking, I'm taking notes and I'm saying, okay, God, give me the best question to ask that is going to be for the highest good of everybody. And I just let it pass through me. Like if I'm analyzing a piece of music and I'm just listening to the chord changes, I'm not trying to say, oh, that's a G or a D or a C. I'm just trying to let it pass through me as best as I can, pass through the humanness. And I'm allowing that spirit to give me these questions. And so I just type them down as quickly as I can, or I make notes or whatever, what I want to say next. And then I just say it. So hypnosis, what was that question? How do
you work with hypnosis and how is it beneficial? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about hypnosis. Like, I'm going to make you walk like a duck or whatever like that.
Yeah, so when make you crack like a duck or drag your ass on the ground like a dog. And
how do you utilize hypnosis when you work with your clients? Because I think the work you do is extraordinary also. And right now we've just been focusing on me, but I want to take a moment and just ask that question because people need to know what a gift you have when it comes to getting people the other side of this.
No, I don't really have a gift, so to speak. And before anybody thinks that is humility speaking, I'll explain. When you understand two very simple principles, one is a law that was created. And when I say a law, it's not going to get you arrested. It's just an idea that we call a presupposition. So we're presupposing that there is something called the law of reversed effect. And it's that information that is subconscious cannot be overridden consciously. The second thing is that we have 95% to 99% of our thinking being performed by what we call the subconscious mind, which interfaces with spirit, it interfaces with your ancestry, your DNA, all these different things. Now, I say the conscious mind is just to stop you from bumping into shit, and the subconscious mind is doing everything else. So what does that mean for you, the average person? It means you can't trust yourself. It means that you have to be from minute to minute snapping yourself back into reality and saying, okay, what am I aware of at this moment? Because most people, their thoughts will just run on repeat. Most people will read something that you say to them, say in a Facebook chat, and they will get triggered and they will have a reaction to that rather than read the words for the words first and then ask themselves after the fact, what do I believe about this and what is true? Truth that threatens identity is filtered out automatically. Now, as soon as you get triggered, your identity is bound to something. Now, because I know that and I practice that for me every day, then I can be driving down the highway of my mind and see all these things passing by. And I know that multiple things are true at the same time, or multiple things are based on lies at the same time. And subconscious mind operates on a what is safe to touch basis. So if somebody comes to you and they're a control freak, do not touch that first. Do not touch anything that could potentially lead you back to I'm a control freak as a belief system, and why, or as I like to say, what is the purpose? I always tell people, if you ask yourself 2 questions, for what purpose am I having this thought, and you wait, you'll get an answer. When you get that answer, depending on the quality of the answer, if it tells you why the reason is that you are thinking it, else it's propping up, you can say, okay, and what does that mean? Or you can ask it again. Okay, so for what purpose do I believe that about that thing? And you will find either one of those 2 distinctions. It's programming, it's linguistic, it's something that came from a repetitive thing in the environment, or it's coming from something that was conditioned into you. You got into trouble for it, you got rejected, you regret, there's resentment. The subconscious mind has a particular language. The subconscious mind is multilingual in a way. So one language that it speaks is, I don't understand what it feels like to be loved by the creator of all that is. I don't understand what it feels like to be safe. I don't understand what it feels like to be good enough for somebody. That's one layer, but there's other levels. It could be coming from other places. So I went that direction to come back to this idea. The brain is not isolated from the subconscious mind, because the brain has all of those nerves that go through your body and looks like a freaking Fraggle. So if you're a child of the 80s, you know what a Fraggle is. It's a real ugly looking Muppet thing. And those things are getting receptors from your body. So all the information in your body, if you follow Bessel van der Kolk's work, which has been lauded by the cult of psychology and overused and misrepresented in the new age and personal development industry as being a complete hard-based fact, he says very simply, the body keeps the score. Hey, the body keeps the score, but the subconscious mind is your nervous system. So everything is related to that. But the problem is, based on everything that hypnotherapy says, because hypnotherapy by its definition is the study of the subconscious mind. Your brain has to cycle through a number of cycles per second every day for a certain number of hours every day. And so that means that you're transitioning into a easily manipulatable state of mind, because you are taking in so much information from your environment that it has to reset, or you would have a series of mini strokes. People laugh when I say that, or they don't quite get it, but you're processing trillions of bits of information if you're just taking a walk through nature. Now add in these squares and tablets and computers and everything being on a screen.
Yeah.
There's that comedian Nathan McIntosh, and he's like, have you ever tried to go to a restaurant and leave your phone at home? Everything's on a screen, right? So it's like everything's on a screen now. You need these things. And so that's actually destroying your brain's natural ability to then regulate everything that's going on in it. Yeah. And that makes us hackable, but it also is very dangerous, because if you have a person that is in extreme stress, you can be guaranteed that their subconscious mind, their nervous system is doing 99% of the work for them. But the problem with that is that the subconscious only does what is comfortably uncomfortable.
Yes, there's comfort in discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope that answered the question. I work with people with the part about me having the gift. I work with people, and so to a certain degree, when I'm inducing hypnosis, I'm like you, I can see the contents of their mind. So
and it's so important to be able to do that, because it puts safety and sidebars around them too, when we can see what is happening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I actually have developed a safe process. So much like you in testing the entities, I test the person's receptivity by asking them certain questions. Mm-hmm. And if it's okay for me to actually be inside their head, sometimes I just won't tell them I'm inside their head, and I won't use any terminology to allude to the fact that I'm doing that at all. Yeah. But I just use very basic induction. Anybody that doesn't know what induction is, it's just the process of getting the person to transition from beta to alpha. Yeah. And it's basic visualization. And so I like to use hallways with rooms, and in the rooms there's doorways to get to other places, or there are compartments, drawers, closets. If a person needs to work on something, they can sit on a couch. I like to use those things. They're very basic, very simple. Yeah. Now, sometimes things may get interesting, and a person may have something like a lamp appears, or some other object. Lamps, well, there's a reason why in cartoons you see a light bulb appears over the person's head, because a lamp, when that person uses that symbology and they turn it on, then oftentimes it's because it's linked them to an idea that they need to activate in order to understand another concept that's buried in another compartment, right? The other language of the multilingual plane that is the subconscious mind is imagery. Not everything that you see is correlated to anything. Nothing actually means anything except for when that person has a particular reaction. I may have them walking and they go down the street and they see people that are familiar to them in their environment where they actually live in real life. And based on questions that I get them to ask them, if there's something hidden in their mind, those people will just point in the direction. You get them to say, hey, do you know what I did with that thing? Have I left anything around here? You know, things like that.
Yeah.
Because the subconscious mind always knows. But the other thing that the subconscious mind is really great at, it's hiding things that it knows will get exposed that are going to cause it to change.
Yeah.
So that's why we use very simple and safe things. We never go directly to the thing that we want to touch.
Right.
We take as long as it takes. If it takes weeks or months to get there, we take our times to get there, because when you don't have the person go through a process of self-realization, you rob their learning from them, and you rob their brain's ability to create those neural pathways that ensure that they don't go back, because there's secondary gains involved in self-sabotage. Secondary gains is just a term to describe what I like to liken to a bubble gum wrapper. You put the piece of gum in your mouth, you start chewing, you put the wrapper in your pocket thinking you're going to use it later, but you never do. You get home and the wrapper is still in your pocket, and you done thrown the gum away 3 hours ago in a garbage bin somewhere, right? So if you don't take that out of your pocket and throw away, you're going to tell yourself, I might need to use this again later for something. That's how sneaky the subconscious mind is.
Yeah.
So you do the same thing when you clear stuff. You have to clear as much as you can, and you may have to come back and clear some more. Now, I do that especially when I'm doing healings. I'm sure there's going to be people trying to contact me now saying, I have something I need to be healed, and that's okay. But let me explain this to you. If you don't seek wise counsel, so if you don't allow me, if you come to me to counsel you, or if you don't go to another counselor that can help you unpack and self-realize and get to the bottom of the belief systems, propping those things up, the unforgiveness, the rejection, the resentment, the regret, the I'm not enoughs, the I'm not safe enoughs, those are the most common things. You don't deal with those things, whatever it is you heal will come right back. I'm working on a client right now, won't forgive for shit. And I'm telling him, you gotta forgive, otherwise all that negative energy, even though you were a paramedic, I'm just gonna say he was a paramedic, he was lifting somebody, he hurt his back. Just because it happened in that way doesn't mean that in the spiritual realm, in the subconscious realm, everything was lining up for that injury to happen based on his mental environment, his unforgiveness, his anger, his resentment, because it turns out everything is tied to rejection from childhood or rejection from an ex, right?
Yeah.
You know, this is the thing that really pops off people's headpieces most of the time, and they just, it's so much information. But listen to this 3 or 4 or 5 times to try to figure out what I'm saying, because I'm giving you the gold. And when you go to Reiki healers and Akashic record readers and sound healers and all these other people, I'm not invalidating them, but you have to test them and find out if they know the stuff I'm telling you. Because if you are a clinical hypnotherapist or you are a $25 certificate coach on the internet and you're working with people, you need to know these principles. You need to understand these principles, because as Chat Jippity would say, I say Jippity because it's jipping you, it's your lived experience.
Yeah.
Right. Is that what you have actually accomplished with your own mental and spiritual and emotional environment that qualifies you? It's not letters after your name.
Yeah.
Laura Van Tyne was a Spanish teacher before this, but she's a kick-ass psychic. You don't want to mess with her. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And she got hard at it through practice.
I did. These are all practices, right? They're just practices, and they always evolve, ideally. Never stand still, never go stagnant. Yeah.
So the reality of it is, in closing, is that you can do the work. You don't need anything outside of you to do the work. You do need wise people who can counsel you.
Yeah.
But you also need people that are not going to coddle you, people that are going to hold you accountable when you start flying off the handle and you start saying certain things and you get triggered and all this kinds of stuff. You will make excuses for your limitations because you're a human being, and that's what we're wired to do.
Yeah.
And anytime you start telling yourself that your experience is different from that, you got an ego problem. You think you're better than other people, and not that you consciously do. Unconsciously, you've been programmed to think that, because that is what is protecting you from changing your environment.
Yes.
It's hardly ever resistance. It's self-protection.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Wow. Well, thank you.
You are welcome.
All right.
Thanks for tuning into the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. I don't have to ask the question, where can we find you? Because you can find her at lauravantyne.com, and everybody knows where I'm at.
Yes. Thank you.